At our wedding reception, surrounded by 300 guests celebrating what they thought was the happiest day of my life, my new husband grabbed my phone and smashed it against the marble floor when I refused to delete the business contacts I had spent 5 years building. That moment of violence and control would expose a carefully hidden pattern of manipulation that had been designed to destroy my entrepreneurial dreams and trap me in a life of financial dependence. But what Daniel Morrison didn't know was that I had been documenting everything, and his moment of rage would become the catalyst that transformed me from a struggling freelancer into the CEO of a multi-million-dollar consulting empire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Sterling, and this is the story of how I learned that the most dangerous prisons are built not with bars and walls, but with promises, expectations, and the slow erosion of your own dreams. 6 months before that devastating moment at our wedding reception, I thought I was living a fairy tale. I was engaged to Daniel Morrison, a successful real estate developer whose family owned half the commercial properties in downtown Phoenix. I had a thriving freelance marketing consultancy that was finally generating 6-figure revenue after 5 years of relentless work. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But perfection, I was about to discover, can be the most suffocating trap of all. The morning that would set everything in motion began like any other Saturday in our Scottsdale penthouse. The November sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the desert landscape I had grown to love during my 8 years in Arizona. I was working at my home office, a converted bedroom that Daniel had reluctantly agreed to let me use for my business operations, responding to emails from potential clients while reviewing proposals for 3 major projects that could double my revenue within 6 months. Sterling Marketing Solutions was my pride and joy, built from nothing more than a laptop, relentless determination, and the marketing degree I had earned while working full-time at a dead-end administrative job. Every client I had secured represented countless hours of networking, proposal writing, and delivering results that exceeded expectations. My contact list contained 5 years of relationship building with business owners, industry professionals, and referral partners who had become the foundation of my growing success. Daniel emerged from our bedroom at nearly 10 o'clock, his dark hair perfectly styled despite having just awakened, wearing the kind of casual designer clothing that cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 35, he possessed the confident bearing of someone who had never questioned whether he would be successful, because success had been guaranteed by family wealth and connections that opened every door before he approached it. "Still working, beautiful?" he asked, kissing the top of my head while glancing at my computer screen with the tolerant amusement he reserved for what he considered my hobby. "It's Saturday morning. Don't you think you deserve a break?" I smiled up at him, appreciating his concern while feeling slightly irritated by the implication that my work was optional rather than essential. "I'm just finishing up some client communications. The Henderson Group wants to move forward with the comprehensive digital marketing package, and if I can get the Morrison tech proposal submitted by Monday, we could be looking at my 2 biggest contracts ever." Daniel's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a tightening around his eyes that I had learned to recognize as displeasure, though he maintained his supportive smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm proud of how hard you work. But you know that after we're married you won't need to push yourself so hard. My income can more than support both of us comfortably." The comment hung in the air between us like a challenge I wasn't sure how to address. We had discussed this topic numerous times during our 18-month engagement, and Daniel had consistently expressed his preference that I scale back my business activities after our wedding. He framed this preference as consideration for my well-being, arguing that I was working too hard and deserving of a more relaxed lifestyle that his financial success could provide. "I appreciate that you want to take care of me," I replied carefully, having learned that direct disagreement with Daniel's preferences often led to lengthy discussions about my priorities and commitment to our relationship. But Sterling Marketing Solutions isn't just about the income. I've built something meaningful here, something that uses my skills and experience to help other businesses succeed. I can't imagine giving that up, even if we don't need the money. Daniel sat down in the chair across from my desk, his posture shifting from casual affection to serious conversation mode. Victoria, I understand that your business has been important to you during this phase of your life, but once we're married, you'll have new responsibilities and opportunities. My mother has been looking forward to involving you in the Family Foundation's charitable activities. There are social obligations that come with being my wife, networking events and community involvement that will require significant time and energy. His words were reasonable and delivered with genuine care, but they felt like a trap closing around my professional identity. The Morrison Family Foundation was indeed prestigious, and involvement with their charitable work would provide meaningful ways to contribute to the community. But Daniel was describing a life where my role would be defined entirely by my relationship to him and his family, where my individual achievements and professional growth would be secondary to supporting his established social and business networks. What if I could balance both? I suggested, hoping to find a compromise that would preserve my business while addressing his concerns. I could reduce my client load and focus on the most profitable accounts while still participating in the foundation activities and social events that are important to you. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious and loving in the way that made disagreeing with him feel selfish and unreasonable. Sweetheart, I've seen how consumed you get with your work. When you're managing multiple client projects, you're checking emails at dinner, taking calls during our weekend plans, and staying up late working on proposals. I don't want our marriage to compete with your business for your attention. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Daniel presenting logical arguments about work-life balance, family priorities, and the lifestyle advantages that would come with focusing on our relationship rather than professional obligations. He never directly demanded that I close my business, but he systematically addressed every compromise I suggested with concerns about sustainability, stress levels, and the impact on our future together. By the time we concluded the discussion, I felt confused and guilty for prioritizing my business over our relationship, even though I knew that wasn't what I was doing. Daniel had a gift for making his preferences seem like the obvious solution to problems I hadn't realized existed. He presented scaling back my business not as his demand, but as the natural evolution of my priorities once I had a husband who could provide financial security. The rest of that weekend passed pleasantly enough, with dinner at our favorite restaurant and a lazy Sunday spent hiking in the desert. But I found myself checking my phone more frequently than usual, responding to client emails with an urgency that felt defensive, as if I were trying to prove something to myself about my commitment to the business I had built. Monday brought a development that would complicate everything Daniel and I had discussed. The Henderson Group, a mid-sized technology company that had been considering my services for 3 months, called to offer me a contract worth $200,000 over 12 months. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I had been working toward for years, the breakthrough client that would establish Sterling Marketing Solutions as a serious player in the Phoenix business community. Victoria, we've been impressed with your strategic thinking and your understanding of our industry challenges, explained Jennifer Chen, Henderson Group's Chief Marketing Officer, during our phone conversation. We want to engage your firm as our primary marketing partner, with the potential for additional project work if the initial campaign exceeds our expectations. The contract represented validation of everything I had built, proof that my skills and dedication were creating real value in the marketplace, but it also represented exactly the kind of time commitment and professional focus that Daniel had expressed concerns about during our weekend conversation. Accepting the Henderson Group contract would require me to hire additional staff, invest in expanded service capabilities, and dedicate myself fully to building the kind of business that could handle major corporate accounts. I scheduled a meeting with Jennifer Chen for Thursday morning to discuss implementation timelines and project requirements. But as I hung up the phone, I realized I was facing a choice between the security of the life Daniel was offering and the uncertain but exciting path of genuine entrepreneurial success. That evening, I shared the news about the Henderson Group contract with Daniel over dinner at home. I had prepared his favorite meal and waited until we were both relaxed before bringing up the subject, hoping to present the opportunity in a way that would help him understand why it was so significant for my professional development. That's wonderful news, beautiful, Daniel said after I explained the contract details, his smile genuine but his eyes reflecting the same concern I had seen Saturday morning. It sounds like a tremendous validation of your talents and hard work. I waited for the qualification I could sense coming. I'm just concerned about the timing, he continued, reaching across the table to take my hand. We're getting married in 6 months, and then we'll want to start thinking about starting a family. This contract sounds like it would require you to be completely focused on work during what should be the most important period of our relationship. Daniel's concerns were reasonable and delivered with obvious love for me and consideration for our future together. But I was beginning to recognize a pattern in our conversations about my business. Every opportunity was met with gentle discouragement framed as protective concern. Every success was acknowledged but qualified with worries about sustainability or impact on our relationship. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What if we delayed starting a family for a year or two? I suggested, knowing the proposal would be controversial, but hoping Daniel might be willing to adjust our timeline to accommodate this career opportunity. I could build Sterling Marketing Solutions into the kind of business that would eventually run itself, creating long-term financial benefits for both of us. Daniel's expression shifted from concern to something that looked like disappointment, though he maintained his patient and loving tone. Victoria, we've talked about this. We're both in our 30s, and if we want to have multiple children, we can't delay indefinitely. My mother has been so excited about becoming a grandmother, and my father has been looking forward to passing along family traditions to the next generation. The conversation that followed was the most difficult we had ever had about our future together. Daniel presented a compelling vision of married life that included travel, charitable work, social connections, and eventually raising children who would benefit from both Morrison family resources and the stability that would come from having a mother who was fully present rather than consumed with professional obligations. I found myself defending not just the Henderson Group contract, but my entire identity as an entrepreneur and business owner. Daniel listened patiently to my arguments, acknowledging my passion and dedication while consistently returning to concerns about balance, family priorities, and the question of whether I was choosing professional achievement over personal fulfillment. By the time we went to bed that night, I felt emotionally exhausted and uncertain about everything I had thought I wanted. Daniel held me close, whispering reassurances about our future together and his commitment to supporting whatever decision would make me happiest. But his version of support seemed to require me to choose between being his wife and being myself. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel and sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of 5 years of building something meaningful from nothing. Client testimonials covered one wall, thanking me for campaigns that had transformed their businesses. Financial records showed steady growth from my first $1,000 contract to monthly revenues that now exceeded what I had earned annually at my previous job. My phone contained hundreds of contacts representing relationships I had cultivated through networking events, referrals, and professional associations. Sterling Marketing Solutions wasn't just my business. It was proof that I could identify opportunities, develop solutions, and create value in the marketplace. It represented independence, professional identity, and the potential for unlimited growth based entirely on my own skills and determination. But it also represented everything that Daniel seemed to see as competing with our relationship and future family plans. The more successful my business became, the more he expressed concerns about sustainability and balance. The more clients demanded my attention, the more he worried about my ability to be fully present as his wife. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to Jennifer Chen at Henderson Group, accepting their contract offer and committing Sterling Marketing Solutions to the most ambitious project in the company's history. But before I could finish typing, I heard Daniel's footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the document. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, bringing me coffee prepared exactly the way I preferred it, another small gesture that demonstrated his attention to my needs and preferences. "Did you sleep well? You seemed restless last night." I accepted the coffee gratefully, touched by his thoughtfulness while feeling guilty about the email I had been composing without discussing it with him first. "I was thinking about our conversation yesterday, about the Henderson Group contract, and what it would mean for our plans." Daniel sat down across from me, his expression serious and caring. "I've been thinking about that too. Victoria, I love your ambition and your talent. I would never want to hold you back from achieving your dreams. But I also want us to build a marriage where we're both fully committed to creating something together, rather than pursuing separate paths that might pull us in different directions. His words were everything I wanted to hear from a supportive partner, but they came with an underlying message that my professional dreams were separate from, rather than compatible with our relationship. Daniel was offering love, security, and partnership, but the price seemed to be abandoning the identity I had spent years building and the potential for unlimited professional growth. What if I could prove that I can handle both? I asked, grasping for a solution that would allow me to keep everything I valued. What if I take the Henderson Group contract and show you that I can be successful in business while still being completely committed to our marriage? Daniel considered this proposal for a long moment, his expression thoughtful and genuinely caring. If that's what you want to try, I'll support you completely. But I want you to promise me something. If you find that managing a major contract is affecting your happiness, your health, or your ability to enjoy our relationship, you'll be honest about that and consider other options. I agreed to his terms, feeling both relieved and apprehensive about the challenge I was accepting. Daniel's support felt genuine, but it came with conditions that placed the burden of proof entirely on me to demonstrate that professional success and personal fulfillment were compatible, rather than competing priorities. That afternoon, I called Jennifer Chen and formally accepted the Henderson Group contract, committing Sterling Marketing Solutions to a year-long engagement that would test every skill I had developed and push the boundaries of what my small firm could accomplish. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. What I didn't realize was that Daniel's apparent support for my decision was actually the beginning of a systematic campaign to prove that I couldn't handle both professional success and personal happiness. Over the following months, he would use every challenge, every late night, and every moment of stress as evidence that my business was incompatible with the life we were building together. But I also didn't realize that my determination to prove him wrong would reveal strengths I never knew I possessed and teach me lessons about manipulation, independence, and the difference between love that supports your growth and control that limits your potential. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything, beginning with a wedding reception, where my refusal to delete my business contacts would expose the true nature of the man I had just married and launch me toward a future I never could have imagined. The Henderson Group contract transformed Sterling Marketing Solutions from a promising freelance operation into a legitimate business that demanded every skill I had developed during 5 years of building client relationships and delivering results. Within 3 weeks of signing the agreement, I had hired 2 part-time employees, leased additional office space, and invested in marketing automation software that would allow us to handle the scale of work the contract required. The transformation was exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. For the first time since starting my business, I was working with a corporate client that had substantial budgets, sophisticated needs, and expectations that pushed me to develop capabilities I had only imagined possessing. Jennifer Chen and her team at Henderson Group were demanding but fair, providing feedback that helped me understand how to position Sterling Marketing Solutions as a strategic partner rather than just a service provider. Daniel's reaction to my professional growth was more complex than I had anticipated. He expressed pride in my achievements and frequently mentioned my success when speaking with friends and family members. But his support came with an undercurrent of concern that manifested in subtle ways. I was only beginning to recognize as manipulation rather than genuine care. "You've been working until midnight 3 nights this week," Daniel observed during dinner at our favorite restaurant, his voice carrying the gentle concern that made disagreeing with him feel selfish. "I'm worried that you're pushing yourself too hard. You look exhausted, and I miss spending relaxed evenings together." His observations were accurate. The Henderson Group project required intensive research, strategic planning, and creative development that consumed most of my waking hours during the initial implementation phase. I was energized by the work but physically drained by the demanding schedule. One had accepted to prove that I could handle major corporate clients. "The first few months are always the most intensive," I explained, hoping Daniel would understand that the current pace was temporary rather than permanent. "Once we have the initial campaigns launched and the systems in place, the workload will become more manageable." This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been working toward for years. Daniel nodded thoughtfully, reaching across the table to take my hand in a gesture that felt both loving and possessive. "I understand that this contract is important to you, and I want to support your success. But I also want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. We're getting married in 4 months, and I want you to be able to enjoy planning our wedding, rather than being consumed with work stress." The wedding planning had become another source of tension between us, though Daniel presented his concerns as consideration for my well-being, rather than criticism of my priorities. His mother, Patricia Morrison, had assumed primary responsibility for organizing what she described as the social event of the season, involving vendors, venues, and guest lists that reflected the Morrison family's prominence in Phoenix society. Patricia was a formidable woman who had spent 40 years building and maintaining the social connections that supported her husband's real estate empire. She approached wedding planning with the same strategic thinking she applied to charitable fundraising, creating an event that would serve multiple purposes beyond celebrating Daniel and my marriage. The wedding would reinforce family relationships, showcase Morrison family success, and establish my position within their social circle. "Victoria, darling, I need your input on the final menu selections," Patricia announced during one of our weekly planning meetings, spreading catering proposals across the dining room table of their Scottsdale estate. "The reception will have 300 guests, including several of your father's most important business associates. We want everything to be absolutely perfect." The scale of the wedding had grown beyond anything I had envisioned when Daniel and I became engaged. My original preference for an intimate ceremony had been gradually transformed into an elaborate celebration that would require extensive preparation and coordination. Patricia's vision was undeniably elegant, but it felt disconnected from my personality and preferences. "These options all look wonderful," I replied diplomatically, reviewing catering menus that cost more than many people's annual salaries. "I trust your judgment about what will work best for the guest list you've assembled." Patricia smiled approvingly, but I caught a flicker of something that might have been disappointment at my lack of enthusiasm. "I want this to be your dream wedding, Victoria. But I also want you to understand that as Daniel's wife, you'll be representing the Morrison family at social and business events throughout your marriage. This wedding will establish how people perceive you in those contexts." Her message was clear. The wedding was not just a celebration of Daniel and my relationship, but my introduction to a social role that would define my identity for years to come. The choices we made about flowers, music, and guest seating would communicate messages about family priorities, social connections, and my willingness to embrace the responsibilities that came with marrying into a prominent family. The weight of these expectations added another layer of complexity to the already demanding schedule. One was managing with the Henderson Group contract. Wedding planning meetings, vendor consultations, and dress fittings required time and mental energy that competed with client deadlines and business development activities. I found myself constantly switching between my professional identity as a strategic marketing consultant and my emerging role as a Morrison family member. The tension between these identities became most apparent during business networking events, where I encountered potential clients and referral partners who could contribute to Sterling Marketing Solutions' continued growth. Daniel typically accompanied me to these events, presenting himself as a supportive partner, while subtly steering conversations toward topics that showcased his own business achievements and family connections. "Victoria has done remarkable work building her consulting practice," Daniel would tell people we met at Chamber of Commerce events and industry conferences. "I'm so proud of her entrepreneurial spirit, though I keep telling her she works too hard. After we're married, I'm hoping she'll find a better balance between business and personal priorities." His comments were intended as compliments, but they consistently undermined my professional credibility by suggesting that my business was a temporary pursuit rather than a serious career commitment. Potential clients who might have been interested in Sterling Marketing Solutions services often responded to Daniel's comments by engaging him in conversations about real estate development, rather than exploring marketing consulting opportunities with me. I began attending some networking events without Daniel, explaining that I needed to focus entirely on business development rather than social interaction. His reaction to this decision revealed the first clear indication of the controlling behavior that had been disguised as protective concern throughout our relationship. "I don't understand why you need to attend these events alone," Daniel said when I mentioned plans to attend a digital marketing conference in Scottsdale without him. "We're a team now, and I enjoy supporting your business activities. Besides, many of the people at these events could be valuable connections for both of our careers." The conversation took place in our kitchen on a Tuesday evening after I had spent 12 hours working on Henderson Group deliverables. I was exhausted and looking forward to a quiet dinner, but Daniel's reaction to my networking plans required immediate attention and careful navigation. "I appreciate your support at these events," I replied, choosing my words carefully to avoid the lengthy discussions that tended to follow when Daniel perceived criticism of his involvement in my business activities. "But this particular conference is focused specifically on technical aspects of digital marketing that might not be interesting for you. I'll be more effective if I can concentrate entirely on learning and making professional connections." Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked like hurt feelings, though he maintained his reasonable and caring tone. "Victoria, I want to understand what's changed. You used to enjoy having me at business events, and I thought I was helpful in making connections and supporting your conversations with potential clients." His observation was partially accurate. During the early stages of building Sterling Marketing Solutions, Daniel's presence at networking events had provided social confidence and open conversations with business owners who were impressed by his family connections and real estate expertise. But as my own professional reputation developed, his well-intentioned support had begun feeling more like oversight than assistance. "Nothing has changed in terms of how much I value your support," I assured him, hoping to address his concerns without triggering a larger conversation about independence and partnership roles. "I just think this particular event will be more productive if I can focus entirely on the technical content rather than splitting my attention between learning and social interaction." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with Daniel expressing confusion about my apparent desire for independence and concern about whether I was pulling away from him as we approached our wedding date. He presented his involvement in my business activities as evidence of his commitment to our partnership, making my preference for professional autonomy seem like rejection of his love and support. By the time we resolved the conversation, I felt guilty for wanting to attend a professional conference without my fiancé, and confused about whether my desire for independence was reasonable or selfish. Daniel's ability to frame his preferences as relationship necessities made it difficult to distinguish between legitimate partnership concerns and controlling behavior disguised as care. The Digital Marketing Conference proved to be exactly the kind of professional development opportunity that Sterling Marketing Solutions needed to expand service capabilities and attract additional corporate clients. I learned about emerging trends in marketing automation, connected with potential strategic partners, and identified software solutions that could dramatically improve efficiency for the Henderson Group project and future clients. But the most significant outcome of attending the conference alone was the realization that I felt more confident and professionally competent when I wasn't managing Daniel's presence alongside my own business objectives. Without the need to include him in conversations or explain technical concepts that didn't interest him, I could engage more authentically with other marketing professionals and focus entirely on opportunities for professional growth. This realization was both liberating and concerning. I loved Daniel and wanted him to be involved in all aspects of my life, but I was beginning to understand that his involvement often came with subtle pressure to modify my priorities, limit my ambitions, or present myself in ways that supported his preferences rather than my professional goals. The tension between these competing needs intensified as we entered the final months before our wedding. Patricia Morrison's planning activities required increasing amounts of my time and attention, while the Henderson Group contract demanded peak performance during the most critical phase of campaign implementation. Sterling Marketing Solutions was experiencing the kind of growth that required strategic decisions about hiring, service expansion, and long-term business development. "I've been thinking about our conversation regarding work-life balance," Daniel said during dinner one evening in February, 3 months before our wedding date. "I have a proposal that might address both of our concerns about managing your business alongside our marriage and family plans." Daniel's proposal was carefully thought out and presented with the loving consideration that characterized all of his attempts to influence my decision-making. He suggested that I consider transitioning Sterling Marketing Solutions from a full-service consulting firm to a boutique practice that would focus exclusively on high-value clients who required minimal ongoing management. This approach would preserve my professional identity while creating the flexibility necessary for marriage and eventual family responsibilities. You could maintain relationships with your best clients and continue doing the strategic work you enjoy most, Daniel explained, his logic sound and his concern for my well-being apparent. But you wouldn't need to manage multiple contracts, supervise employees, or spend time on administrative tasks that don't utilize your core talents. It would be the best of both worlds. The proposal was seductive because it acknowledged my professional capabilities while addressing the practical challenges of managing an expanding business alongside marriage to someone whose family had significant social and charitable obligations. Daniel was offering a compromise that would preserve my identity as a marketing consultant, while eliminating the aspects of business ownership that created the most stress and time demands. But the proposal also represented a fundamental limitation on my professional potential. Transitioning to a boutique practice would mean abandoning the growth trajectory that could transform Sterling Marketing Solutions into a significant business, with multiple employees, diverse service offerings, and the potential for substantial financial returns. It would mean choosing security and balance over the uncertain but unlimited possibilities that came with genuine entrepreneurial success. I appreciate that you've thought so carefully about this, I replied, stalling for time while I processed the implications of his suggestion. Let me finish the Henderson Group project and see how I feel about managing this level of work alongside wedding planning and the transition to married life. Daniel agreed to postpone any major decisions until after our wedding, but his proposal had introduced a new dynamic into our relationship. He was no longer simply expressing concerns about my work schedule or offering general support for whatever decisions would make me happiest. He was actively advocating for a specific vision of my professional future that aligned with his preferences for our married life together. The final months of wedding planning passed in a blur of vendor meetings, dress fittings, and guest list management that consumed most of my non-working hours. Patricia Morrison's vision for our celebration had evolved into an elaborate production that required coordination between florists, caterers, musicians, and venue staff, who all reported directly to her rather than to me. I felt like a participant in, rather than the organizer of my own wedding. The Henderson Group project reached successful completion 2 weeks before our wedding date, delivering results that exceeded Jennifer Chen's expectations and establishing Sterling Marketing Solutions as a credible partner for major corporate accounts. The success felt vindicating after months of managing demanding deadlines alongside wedding preparation stress, proving that I could handle significant professional challenges without sacrificing quality or client satisfaction. Congratulations on completing such a successful project, Daniel said when I shared the final Henderson Group results with him. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, and I think this proves that you can handle anything you set your mind to. Now you can focus entirely on enjoying our wedding and starting our married life together without the pressure of major business deadlines. His words were supportive and loving, but they carried an implication that the Henderson Group project represented the culmination of my business ambitions rather than the foundation for greater professional achievements. Daniel seemed to view my success as validation that I could now afford to prioritize our relationship over continued business growth. What Daniel didn't realize was that completing the Henderson Group project had given me confidence in my professional capabilities and a clearer vision of what Sterling Marketing Solutions could become with continued focus and strategic development. Rather than feeling ready to scale back my business activities, I was more motivated than ever to pursue the kind of entrepreneurial success that would establish my company as a leader in the Phoenix marketing consulting market. The stage was set for a confrontation between Daniel's vision of our married life and my determination to build something significant and lasting through my own skills and efforts. Neither of us anticipated how dramatically that confrontation would unfold at our wedding reception, or how a single moment of violence would expose the true nature of our relationship and launch me toward a future I never could have imagined. The final week before our wedding brought an intensity of preparation that consumed every available moment and revealed the true scope of Patricia Morrison's vision for what she consistently referred to as the social event of the season. The Phoenician Resort's ballroom had been transformed into an elaborate showcase of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and gold accents that would accommodate 300 guests for what Patricia described as a celebration worthy of the Morrison family legacy. My role in these final preparations felt increasingly peripheral, despite being the bride whose marriage was supposedly being celebrated. Patricia managed vendor coordination, guest relations, and logistical details, with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades organizing high-profile social events. She consulted with me on major decisions, but clearly preferred when I expressed enthusiasm for her choices, rather than suggesting alternatives that might complicate her carefully orchestrated plans. Daniel seemed energized by the approaching wedding in ways that highlighted the differences between his priorities and mine. While I felt overwhelmed by the scale of celebration Patricia had organized, he thrived on the social significance of an event that would reinforce his position within Phoenix's business and social communities. He spoke frequently about specific guests whose attendance represented important relationship-building opportunities, and seemed particularly pleased that several prominent business leaders had rearranged their schedules to participate in our celebration. "This wedding is going to establish us as a power couple in Phoenix," Daniel told me during one of our final planning conversations, his excitement evident as he reviewed the guest list that Patricia had assembled. "The connections we make during this event will benefit both of our careers for years to come. Your marketing expertise and my real estate background, combined with the Morrison family network, will create opportunities neither of us could access independently." His perspective on our wedding as a strategic networking opportunity, rather than primarily a celebration of our relationship, felt uncomfortable, but I recognized the practical value of the connections he was describing. Many of the business leaders attending our reception could potentially become clients for Sterling Marketing Solutions, and establishing relationships within Daniel's established network could accelerate my professional growth in ways that years of individual networking might not achieve. However, Daniel's enthusiasm for the business benefits of our wedding came with expectations about how I would present myself and my professional priorities during the reception and in future social interactions with his family's connections. He had made several comments about the importance of appearing balanced, rather than overly focused on work, when meeting people who might form lasting impressions about my character and priorities. "I want everyone to see how talented and accomplished you are," Daniel explained when I questioned his suggestions about conversation topics and professional positioning. "But I also want them to understand that you're someone who values family and relationships above career advancement. That's the kind of person who fits well within the Morrison family's social circle and business network." The distinction Daniel was drawing between being accomplished and being career-focused revealed his underlying expectations about how marriage would modify my professional identity. He wanted me to be recognized for my marketing expertise and business success, but only within the context of someone whose primary priorities were family relationships and social responsibilities rather than continued professional growth and achievement. This tension between professional recognition and modified priorities became particularly apparent during the final business meetings I conducted in the week before our wedding. Sterling Marketing Solutions had received inquiries from 3 potential clients who had learned about the Henderson Group project's success and were interested in similar comprehensive marketing strategies for their own companies. The timing was both exciting and problematic, offering validation of my growing reputation while requiring immediate attention during the most demanding week of wedding preparation. "I understand this is terrible timing with your wedding this weekend," said Michael Rodriguez, founder of a growing software development company, during a phone consultation 3 days before the ceremony. "But we're facing a critical deadline for a product launch that could determine our company's viability. If Sterling Marketing Solutions could help us develop a strategic marketing plan, it could literally save our business." The emotional appeal of Rodriguez's situation resonated deeply with my entrepreneurial instincts and my genuine desire to help business owners overcome challenges that threaten their survival. His company's product had genuine market potential, but they lacked the marketing expertise necessary to reach their target audience effectively. Sterling Marketing Solutions could provide exactly the strategic guidance they needed to transform a promising product into a successful business. However, accepting Rodriguez's project would require intensive work during the honeymoon period Daniel and I had planned for recovering from the wedding and beginning our married life together. We had reserved 2 weeks for a combination of travel and relaxation that Daniel described as essential for transitioning from the stress of wedding planning to the enjoyment of being married. When I mentioned Rodriguez's inquiry to Daniel, his reaction was more intense than I had anticipated. Rather than the gentle concern that typically characterized his responses to my business opportunities, he expressed what appeared to be genuine frustration about the timing and my apparent consideration of accepting work during our honeymoon period. "Victoria, we've been planning this wedding for 18 months, and you've been working constantly on the Henderson Group project throughout most of that time," Daniel said, his voice carrying an edge of irritation that I rarely heard from him. "Our honeymoon is supposed to be about celebrating our marriage and enjoying each other's company without the distractions of work responsibilities. Can't this potential client wait until we return?" His frustration was understandable given the timing of Rodriguez's request, but his assumption that I would automatically decline the opportunity without serious consideration felt presumptuous in ways that highlighted our different approaches to professional obligations. Daniel seemed to view the honeymoon period as sacred time that should be protected from any business considerations, while I saw it as potentially flexible depending on the significance of opportunities that might arise. "I haven't committed to anything," I assured him, hoping to address his concerns while preserving my ability to make an informed decision about Rodriguez's project. "I'm just trying to understand what they need and whether it's something that could wait until we return from our trip." The conversation that followed revealed the depth of Daniel's expectations about how marriage would modify my relationship with business opportunities. He spoke about the importance of establishing boundaries between professional and personal time, the necessity of protecting our relationship from the kind of work pressures that had consumed much of our engagement period, and his concerns about my ability to say no to clients who might take advantage of my dedication and work ethic. "I love your commitment to helping other businesses succeed," Daniel said, his tone returning to the loving concern that made disagreeing with him feel selfish. "But I also worry that you have difficulty setting limits with clients who make emotional appeals about their business survival. Rodriguez's company has been operating for 3 years without your help. They can survive another 2 weeks while you focus on starting your marriage properly." Daniel's observations about my tendency to accept emotionally compelling projects were accurate, but his conclusion that Rodriguez could wait felt dismissive of both the client's genuine needs and my professional judgment about project timing and business development opportunities. His framing of client work as a threat to our marriage rather than a component of my professional identity suggested fundamental differences in how we perceived the role business would play in our life together. I ultimately decided to refer Rodriguez to another marketing consultant, rather than risk creating tension during our wedding week, but the decision felt like a compromise of my professional instincts in favor of relationship harmony. The pattern was becoming familiar. Daniel's preferences, presented as relationship necessities, consistently took precedence over my business judgment and professional opportunities. The wedding rehearsal took place on Friday evening at the Phoenician Resort, bringing together the wedding party, immediate family members, and out-of-town guests for what Patricia had organized as an elegant dinner celebration in the resort's private dining room. The evening provided my first opportunity to observe how Daniel interacted with my family and friends within the context of his family's social environment. My parents, Robert and Helen Sterling, had flown in from Denver, where my father worked as an engineering manager and my mother taught elementary school. They were good people who had supported my educational and professional goals throughout my life, but they seemed somewhat overwhelmed by the scale and formality of the celebration Patricia had organized. The contrast between their middle-class backgrounds and the Morrison family's wealth was apparent in subtle ways that made me more conscious of the social and economic differences that marriage would navigate. "Your future mother-in-law certainly knows how to throw a party," my mother whispered to me during cocktails before the rehearsal dinner, her tone carrying both admiration and slight intimidation. "This is more elaborate than anything your father and I have ever attended. I hope we're dressed appropriately for the occasion." My parents were dressed perfectly appropriately, but their concern about fitting into Daniel's family's social environment highlighted the cultural adjustment that marriage would require not just for me but for my entire family. The Sterling family's values emphasized education, hard work, and personal achievement, but within a framework of middle-class expectations and resources that differed significantly from the Morrison family's approach to success and social positioning. Daniel navigated these differences with skillful diplomacy, engaging my parents in conversations about their careers and interests, while gradually introducing them to other guests whose backgrounds and achievements would impress them. He presented my family's accomplishments in ways that emphasized their character and values rather than their economic circumstances, making them feel welcomed rather than out of place within his family's social circle. However, I noticed that Daniel's presentation of my professional achievements followed a similar pattern to his comments at business networking events. He acknowledged Sterling Marketing Solutions' success and my marketing expertise, but consistently framed my business as something I had built during our engagement period, rather than as an ongoing career commitment that would continue throughout our marriage. Victoria has done remarkable work building her consulting practice over the past few years, Daniel told his father's business associates during cocktail conversations. She's incredibly talented and dedicated, though I keep telling her she works too hard. I'm looking forward to helping her find better balance once we're married and can share responsibilities more equally. Quote, "These comments were intended as compliments that would impress other business leaders with my capabilities, while also communicating Daniel's role as a supportive husband who would help me achieve better work-life balance. But they consistently positioned my business success as something that would be modified rather than expanded through marriage, creating impressions that could limit future business opportunities with people who might otherwise become important clients or referral sources." The rehearsal dinner conversation that proved most significant took place between Daniel and my best friend Sarah Chen, who had flown in from Los Angeles where she worked as a corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions. Sarah had been my closest friend since college and had witnessed both my struggles to build Sterling Marketing Solutions and my relationship development with Daniel over the past 2 years. "I'm so proud of everything Victoria has accomplished with her business," Sarah told Daniel during dinner, her tone warm but with an underlying intensity that suggested deeper meaning. "She's built something really significant from nothing, and it's exciting to see how much potential there is for continued growth. I hope marriage will support, rather than limit her professional ambitions." Daniel's response to Sarah's comment was carefully diplomatic, but it revealed his discomfort with direct challenges to his vision of how marriage would affect my professional priorities. "I want nothing more than to support Victoria's success and happiness," he replied, his tone friendly but slightly defensive. "But I also want to make sure she has the opportunity to enjoy life beyond work responsibilities. Balance is important for long-term success and personal fulfillment." The exchange was polite and reasonable on both sides, but it highlighted the fundamental tension between Daniel's protective approach to my professional activities and Sarah's advocacy for my continued business growth. Sarah understood my entrepreneurial ambitions and the satisfaction I derived from building something significant through my own efforts. Daniel understood my tendency toward overwork and his desire to provide the security that would allow me to make choices based on personal fulfillment rather than financial necessity. Both perspectives had merit, but they represented different visions of what my future should look like, and different assumptions about what would make me happiest in the long term. Sarah saw unlimited potential for professional achievement that marriage should support and enhance. Daniel saw an opportunity for me to achieve better balance by reducing professional stress and focusing more attention on personal relationships and family responsibilities. The rehearsal concluded with Patricia's detailed instructions about ceremony timing, processional order, and reception logistics that would ensure the wedding proceeded according to her carefully developed plans. Every element had been considered and coordinated to create the kind of flawless celebration that would reflect positively on the Morrison family's attention to detail and commitment to excellence. As I prepared for bed in the bridal suite that Patricia had reserved for me at the resort, I felt simultaneously excited and apprehensive about the ceremony that would take place the following afternoon. The wedding would represent the culmination of 18 months of planning and the beginning of a married life that would require navigating the complex dynamics I had observed during the rehearsal dinner conversations. My phone buzzed with final messages from clients, vendors, and friends who were sending good wishes for the wedding day. Among them was a text from Michael Rodriguez, the software company founder whose project I had referred to another consultant earlier in the week. His message was brief but meaningful. "Thank you for the referral to Janet Wilson. She's exactly what our company needed, and I understand you're getting married this weekend. Congratulations, and I hope we can work together in the future when the timing is better." Rodriguez's message reminded me that declining his project had been the right decision for managing wedding week stress, but it also represented the first of what would likely be many choices between business opportunities and the relationship expectations that came with being Daniel's wife. The decision-making framework that had guided my professional development for 5 years would need to be recalibrated to account for marriage responsibilities and Daniel's preferences about work-life balance. As I fell asleep in the luxurious bridal suite, surrounded by wedding preparations that would culminate in tomorrow's ceremony, I felt confident that Daniel and I could navigate these challenges successfully. We loved each other, shared compatible values about family and success, and both wanted to build a marriage that would support our individual growth while creating something meaningful together. What I didn't anticipate was how dramatically the events of our wedding reception would expose the true nature of Daniel's expectations about marriage and control, or how a single moment of violence would reveal that the man I was marrying was not the supportive partner I believed him to be, but someone whose love came with conditions that would ultimately require me to choose between his approval and my own identity. The morning of our wedding dawned with the kind of crystalline Arizona sunshine that transforms the Sonoran Desert into a landscape of impossible beauty. From the bridal suite windows at the Phoenician Resort, I could see the ceremonial gardens, where Patricia Morrison had orchestrated what would undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most elegant weddings in Phoenix social history. White roses cascaded from every available surface, crystal accents caught and reflected the morning light, and the carefully manicured grounds provided a backdrop that seemed designed specifically for the kind of photographs that would grace society pages and family archives for generations. I woke before my alarm, energized by anticipation, despite the late evening of final preparations and emotional conversations that had characterized the rehearsal dinner. Today would mark the beginning of a new chapter in my life, the formalization of a partnership with a man who loved me deeply and wanted to build something meaningful together. The challenges we had navigated during our engagement regarding work-life balance and professional priorities felt manageable in the context of the commitment we were making to support each other's growth and happiness. Sarah Chen arrived at 7 o'clock to begin the morning preparations that Patricia had scheduled with military precision. As my maid of honor, Sarah would coordinate the complex timeline of hairstyling, makeup application, photography sessions, and final preparations that would transform the bridal suite into command central for the day's most important activities. Her presence provided both practical support and emotional grounding as I prepared to transition from engaged woman to married wife. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked as she helped me organize the various elements of my wedding outfit. From the custom-designed dress that had required 6 months of fittings to the vintage jewelry that represented 4 generations of Morrison family brides. Nervous? Excited? Ready to become Mrs. Daniel Morrison? The question was simple, but it touched on the complex emotions I had been processing throughout the final weeks of wedding preparation. I felt deeply in love with Daniel and genuinely excited about the life we would build together. But I also felt apprehensive about the adjustments that marriage would require, particularly regarding my professional identity and the business I had spent 5 years developing into something significant and personally meaningful. "I feel ready," I replied, choosing words that reflected my genuine commitment while acknowledging the uncertainty that accompanied any major life transition. Daniel and I have worked through most of our concerns about balancing marriage and career responsibilities. I think we understand each other's priorities and have found ways to support each other's goals while building something together that neither of us could achieve independently. Sarah smiled, but I detected a flicker of concern in her expression that suggested she harbored reservations about Daniel's approach to my professional activities. As someone who had built her own successful legal career while navigating the challenges of corporate advancement and work-life integration, Sarah understood both the opportunities and obstacles that ambitious women faced when making major personal commitments. "I hope he continues to be as supportive of your business growth as he's been during your engagement," Sarah said carefully, her tone neutral but carrying implications that reflected our conversations over the past months about Daniel's subtle attempts to modify my professional priorities. "You've built something really impressive with Sterling Marketing Solutions, and it would be a shame to limit that growth just when you're positioned for major expansion." Sarah's comment highlighted the central tension I had been grappling with throughout our engagement period. Daniel expressed pride in my professional achievements and consistently described himself as supportive of my business success. However, his definition of support seemed to require modifications in my approach to client work, business development, and long-term strategic planning that would ensure my professional activities remained secondary to our relationship and family responsibilities. The morning preparation activities provided a welcome distraction from these complex considerations. Patricia Morrison had arranged for a team of beauty professionals whose expertise transformed the bridal suite into an elaborate salon, where every detail of my appearance would be perfected according to her vision of how a Morrison family bride should look on her wedding day. The process was simultaneously relaxing and overwhelming, requiring several hours of careful attention to hairstyling, makeup application, and wardrobe coordination, that would create the kind of flawless presentation expected for such an important social event. My mother Helen arrived during the makeup phase, bringing with her the kind of emotional warmth and practical support that had characterized her approach to parenting throughout my life. She had flown in from Denver 2 days early to participate in the final wedding preparations, but this was her first opportunity to spend quiet time with me, since the rehearsal dinner's formal activities had consumed most of our previous interactions. "You look absolutely radiant," my mother said as she watched the makeup artist apply the final touches that would ensure my appearance photographed beautifully under the various lighting conditions we would encounter throughout the day. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become, and the life you're building with Daniel. Your father and I couldn't be happier about this marriage." My parents' approval of Daniel and our relationship had been consistent throughout our engagement, though I recognized their perspective was influenced by their appreciation for his financial stability, family connections, and apparent commitment to treating me well. They had witnessed my struggles to build sterling marketing solutions during periods of financial uncertainty and irregular income, and they viewed Daniel's ability to provide security as a significant advantage that would allow me to pursue my professional interests without the stress of worrying about basic financial needs. "Thank you for everything you and Dad have done to make this day special," I replied, feeling genuinely grateful for their support, while also recognizing that their vision of successful marriage emphasized security and partnership over individual achievement and professional growth. "I know the scale of this celebration is much larger than anything you experienced with your own wedding, but Patricia has been wonderful about including our family in all the planning decisions." The conversation with my mother continued throughout the morning preparation activities, covering topics that ranged from practical advice about marriage adjustment to emotional reflections on the significance of the commitment I was making. Her perspective provided valuable context for understanding marriage as a partnership that required compromise, communication, and mutual support for navigating the various challenges that life would inevitably present. However, I noticed that my mother's advice consistently emphasized adaptation and accommodation, rather than maintaining individual identity and pursuing personal goals within the context of marriage. Her generation had approached marriage with different expectations about gender roles, professional priorities, and the balance between individual fulfillment and family responsibilities. While her insights were valuable, they reflected assumptions about marriage that might not align with my own vision of how Daniel and I would navigate the intersection between personal relationship and professional ambitions. The photographer arrived at noon to begin the extensive documentation that Patricia had commissioned to preserve every significant moment of the wedding day. The photography session would include individual portraits, family groupings, bridal party images, and candid shots that would create a comprehensive visual record of what Patricia consistently described as a historic occasion for the Morrison family legacy. During the individual portrait session, I had the opportunity to see myself fully transformed into the vision of bridal elegance that Patricia had orchestrated through months of careful planning and coordination. The custom wedding dress fit perfectly, the vintage jewelry complemented the overall aesthetic beautifully, and the professional hair and makeup created the kind of sophisticated appearance that would photograph well in the various settings we would encounter throughout the day. Looking at myself in the full-length mirrors that the photographer had positioned around the bridal suite, I felt a complex mixture of emotions that reflected both excitement about the commitment I was making and apprehension about the changes that marriage would bring to my daily life and professional identity. The woman in the mirror looked confident, elegant, and ready to embrace the responsibilities that came with becoming Daniel Morrison's wife and a member of one of Phoenix's most prominent families. But underneath the surface transformation, I remained the same person who had built a successful business through determination, creativity, and an unwillingness to accept limitations on what was possible through focused effort and strategic thinking. Marriage would add new dimensions to my identity, but it should not require abandoning the qualities that had enabled me to create something meaningful and personally satisfying through entrepreneurial achievement. The ceremony preparation reached its crescendo during the final hour before the processional was scheduled to begin. Patricia Morrison coordinated the complex logistics that would ensure every element proceeded according to the detailed timeline she had developed to manage 300 guests, multiple vendors, and the various family members whose participation would create the kind of flawless celebration that would reflect positively on Morrison family standards for social events. My final preparation activities included reviewing the ceremony order with the wedding coordinator, receiving last-minute instructions from Patricia about reception protocols, and participating in a brief prayer circle with immediate family members who wanted to mark the spiritual significance of the commitment Daniel and I were making to each other and to the families whose traditions we would be joining together. During these final moments before leaving the bridal suite, I received several text messages from business contacts and professional colleagues who were sending congratulations and best wishes for the wedding day. Among them was a message from Jennifer Chen at Henderson Group, whose contract had provided the foundation for Sterling Marketing Solutions' transition from freelance operation to legitimate consulting firm. "Congratulations on your wedding day," Jennifer's message read. "You should be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished professionally, and I hope marriage brings you even greater success and happiness. Henderson Group looks forward to continuing our partnership and exploring additional opportunities for collaboration as your business continues to grow." Jennifer's message provided reassurance that my professional relationships remained strong and that the business I had built would continue to provide opportunities for meaningful work and continued growth. Her reference to future collaboration suggested that successful completion of their initial contract had established Sterling Marketing Solutions' reputation for delivering exceptional results under challenging circumstances. However, reading Jennifer's message while surrounded by wedding preparation activities highlighted the complex balancing act that marriage would require between maintaining professional relationships and meeting the social expectations that came with being Daniel's wife. The business contacts who had sent congratulatory messages represented relationships I had cultivated through years of networking, client service, and industry involvement that had been essential for building my consulting practice into something sustainable and financially rewarding. The processional began at exactly 4 o'clock, with the precision timing that Patricia had coordinated to ensure optimal lighting conditions for both photography and the visual impact of the ceremony setting. The string quartet performed the classical music selections that Daniel and I had chosen during one of our rare collaborative decisions about wedding planning details, creating an atmosphere of elegant celebration that complemented the sophisticated aesthetic Patricia had orchestrated. Walking down the aisle toward Daniel, surrounded by 300 guests who represented the social and business networks that would become part of my extended community through marriage, I felt overwhelmed by the significance of the commitment I was making and the life transformation that would begin as soon as we exchanged vows. The ceremony setting was undeniably beautiful, and the guests' attention was focused on celebrating a relationship that had brought genuine happiness and personal growth to both Daniel and me. Daniel looked exceptionally handsome in his custom tuxedo, his confidence and satisfaction evident as he watched me approach the altar, where we would formalize the partnership we had been building throughout our engagement period. His expression conveyed both love and pride, suggesting that he felt as ready as I did to begin the next chapter of our lives together, as husband and wife committed to supporting each other's growth and happiness. The ceremony itself proceeded flawlessly, according to Patricia's carefully coordinated plans. The officiant, a family friend who had known Daniel since childhood, delivered remarks that emphasized the significance of marriage as both a personal commitment and a social institution that connected individual happiness to broader community values and family traditions. The vows we exchanged were traditional but heartfelt, expressing our commitment to supporting each other through the various challenges and opportunities that life would present. When Daniel placed the wedding ring on my finger and spoke the words that would legally and socially transform me from Victoria Sterling to Victoria Morrison, I felt genuine emotion about the commitment we were making and the future we would build together. Despite the concerns I had developed about his approach to my professional activities, I believed deeply in his love for me and his sincere desire to create a marriage that would enhance rather than limit both of our opportunities for personal fulfillment and achievement. The recessional concluded with congratulations from family members and the beginning of cocktail hour activities that would bridge the formal ceremony with the elaborate reception Patricia had planned for celebrating our marriage with the broader community of friends, colleagues, and business associates who had gathered to witness this significant occasion. The transition from ceremony to reception represented a shift from the intimate spiritual commitment Daniel and I had made to each other toward the social celebration that would establish our new status within the community networks that would influence our married life. As we moved from the ceremony location to the reception venue, I felt confident that we had successfully navigated the most complex aspects of wedding planning and were prepared to enjoy celebrating our marriage with the people who mattered most to both of us. The challenges we had discussed regarding work-life balance and professional priorities felt manageable within the context of the love and commitment we had just formalized through our wedding vows. What I could not have anticipated was how the evening's celebration would reveal aspects of Daniel's character that had been carefully concealed throughout our engagement, or how a single moment of violence and control would expose the true nature of his expectations about marriage and transform what should have been the happiest day of my life into the catalyst for the most difficult and ultimately transformative period of my personal and professional development. The cocktail hour that preceded our formal reception provided the first indication that the evening would unfold differently than I had anticipated. Patricia Morrison had orchestrated the event with her characteristic attention to detail, transforming the Phoenician Resort's ballroom into an elegant showcase that would impress even the most sophisticated guests among Phoenix's business and social elite. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over arrangements of white roses and gold accents, while a jazz quartet provided sophisticated background music that encouraged conversation without overwhelming the social interactions that were the primary purpose of the gathering. The guest list represented a comprehensive cross-section of Daniel's family connections, business relationships, and social networks that had been cultivated over decades of strategic relationship building within Phoenix's most influential circles. Real estate developers, banking executives, prominent attorneys, and established business owners mingled with family members and longtime friends, creating the kind of networking environment that could generate opportunities and partnerships extending far beyond the celebration of our marriage. However, as I moved through the cocktail reception, accepting congratulations, and engaging in conversation with guests I was meeting for the first time, I began to notice patterns in how people responded to my professional background and business activities. The responses fell into distinct categories that revealed different assumptions about how marriage would affect my career priorities and long-term professional goals. Business associates of Daniel's father expressed polite interest in Sterling Marketing Solutions, while clearly viewing my consulting work as a temporary pursuit that would naturally diminish in importance once I assumed the social and family responsibilities that came with being a Morrison family member. Their congratulations focused primarily on the marriage itself rather than acknowledging the professional achievements that had occupied most of my attention and energy for the past 5 years. "Congratulations on your beautiful wedding," said Thomas Bradley, a prominent commercial real estate developer who had worked with Daniel's father on several major projects. "Daniel is fortunate to have found such an accomplished woman, though I suspect you'll find plenty to keep you busy with family obligations and the charitable activities that Patricia has been looking forward to sharing with you." Bradley's comment was representative of similar conversations throughout the cocktail hour. The business leaders who comprised a significant portion of our guest list acknowledged my professional background, but consistently framed marriage as a transition toward different priorities, rather than an opportunity to build upon existing achievements while adding new dimensions to my life. Their perspective reflected traditional assumptions about gender roles and family responsibilities that felt increasingly uncomfortable as the evening progressed. The responses from my own professional contacts were markedly different, reflecting genuine understanding of what Sterling Marketing Solutions represented and appreciation for the growth potential that continued business development could provide. Several marketing professionals and business owners who had attended the wedding specifically to support my career progression expressed enthusiasm about future collaboration opportunities and recognition of the strategic advantages that would come from establishing myself within Daniel's family's extensive business networks. "Victoria, congratulations on your wedding and on everything you've accomplished professionally," said Rachel Martinez, a fellow marketing consultant who had become both a competitor and collaborator on various projects throughout my business development efforts. "I'm excited to see how marriage enhances, rather than limits, your professional opportunities. The Morrison family connections could open doors that would accelerate Sterling Marketing Solutions' growth in ways that individual networking might take years to achieve." Rachel's perspective aligned with my own vision of how marriage should function as a partnership that amplified both individuals' capabilities, rather than requiring one person to diminish their ambitions in service of the other's established priorities. Her recognition of the potential business advantages that would come through Daniel's family networks validated my belief that marriage could enhance rather than constrain professional growth if approached with strategic thinking and mutual support. The contrast between these different perspectives on my professional future became increasingly apparent as the cocktail hour progressed and formal reception activities began. Daniel moved through the crowd with natural confidence, introducing me to important business contacts, while simultaneously communicating subtle messages about his expectations for how I would balance professional activities with the social responsibilities that would define my role within his established community networks. "I want you to meet my wife Victoria," Daniel would say when introducing me to business associates and family friends. "She's built an impressive marketing consulting practice, though I keep telling her she works too hard. I'm looking forward to helping her find better balance once we settle into married life and can share responsibilities more equally." These introductions were intended as compliments that would establish my professional credibility, while also positioning Daniel as a supportive husband who would help me achieve healthier work-life integration. However, the consistent emphasis on reducing rather than expanding my professional activities created impressions that could limit future business opportunities with people who might otherwise become valuable clients or referral sources. The pattern became particularly pronounced when Daniel introduced me to several business owners who expressed initial interest in Sterling Marketing Solutions services, but responded to his comments about work-life balance by shifting conversations toward topics that focused on his real estate expertise rather than exploring potential marketing consulting opportunities. His well-intentioned efforts to protect me from what he perceived as excessive work demands were inadvertently undermining the professional relationship building that networking events were designed to facilitate. The formal reception began with Patricia Morrison serving as master of ceremonies for the various traditional activities that would mark the significant moments of our wedding celebration. The dinner service featured a menu that had been selected to impress guests while accommodating the dietary preferences and cultural backgrounds represented within our diverse guest list. The attention to detail was impeccable, reflecting Patricia's experience organizing high-profile social events that needed to satisfy multiple constituencies, while maintaining the elegant atmosphere that supported meaningful conversation and relationship building. During dinner, I found myself seated at the head table between Daniel and my father, providing an optimal vantage point for observing the social dynamics that were unfolding throughout the ballroom. The seating arrangements that Patricia had developed strategically positioned influential business leaders near family members, who could facilitate introductions and conversations that might generate future opportunities for various attendees. The wedding reception was serving multiple purposes beyond celebrating our marriage, functioning as a networking event that would reinforce existing relationships while creating possibilities for new business partnerships and social connections. The dinner conversation at our table focused primarily on family traditions, business achievements, and the various charitable activities that occupied much of Patricia Morrison's attention throughout the year. Daniel's father, Charles Morrison, shared stories about the real estate projects that had established the family's prominence within Phoenix's business community, while Patricia described the foundation work that had become her primary focus since their children had reached adulthood and no longer required daily parental involvement. "Victoria, I'm looking forward to involving you in our foundation's educational initiatives," Patricia said during a conversation about charitable priorities and community involvement opportunities. "Your marketing expertise could be invaluable for developing communication strategies that would increase public awareness of the programs we support. It would be meaningful work that uses your professional skills while contributing to causes that make a real difference in our community." Patricia's invitation to participate in foundation activities represented exactly the kind of opportunity that could provide purposeful work while building relationships within the Morrison family's established networks. However, her framing of foundation involvement as an alternative to rather than complement for continued business development suggested assumptions about how marriage would modify my professional priorities and time allocation that aligned with Daniel's consistent preference for scaling back rather than expanding my consulting activities. My parents contributed to the dinner conversation by sharing stories about their own experiences, balancing career responsibilities with family obligations, offering perspectives that emphasized compromise, communication, and mutual support as essential elements for successful marriage navigation. Their insights were valuable and well-intentioned, but they reflected generational assumptions about gender roles and family priorities that might not apply to contemporary marriages where both partners had established professional identities and career ambitions. The dinner concluded with toasts from family members and close friends who offered congratulations and best wishes for our future together. Sarah Chen's toast as my maid of honor was particularly meaningful, acknowledging both the personal happiness that marriage had brought to my life and the professional achievements that represented significant accomplishments worthy of recognition and continued development. Victoria has always been someone who pursues excellence in everything she commits to, Sarah said, addressing the assembled guests while looking directly at me with genuine affection and pride. She built Sterling Marketing Solutions from nothing into a thriving business that helps other entrepreneurs achieve their goals. I know that marriage will enhance rather than limit her ability to make a positive impact through both personal relationships and professional contributions. Sarah's toast provided public recognition of my business achievements while expressing confidence that marriage would support, rather than constrain, continued professional growth. Her words created a counterpoint to the various conversations throughout the evening that had emphasized scaling back work activities in favor of family responsibilities and social obligations that would define my role within the Morrison family's established community networks. Daniel's response to Sarah's toast was gracious but revealing, acknowledging my professional accomplishments while consistently returning to themes about balance, partnership, and the adjustments that would be necessary for building a successful marriage that prioritized our relationship above individual career considerations. I'm incredibly proud of everything Victoria has achieved professionally, Daniel said during his reciprocal toast. Her dedication and talent have built something truly impressive with Sterling Marketing Solutions. But what I love most about Victoria is her recognition that success means different things at different stages of life, and her willingness to embrace the new opportunities and responsibilities that marriage will bring to both of us. Quote, Daniel's toast was skillfully constructed to acknowledge my achievements, while communicating his expectations about how marriage would modify my approach to professional activities and long-term career planning. His emphasis on new opportunities and responsibilities suggested a vision of married life, where my business activities would become secondary to the social and family obligations that would define my role as his wife and a member of the Morrison family community. Following the formal toasts, the reception transitioned into the social dancing and continued networking that would occupy the remainder of the evening. The band that Patricia had selected began performing music that would encourage both romantic dancing between couples and the kind of social interaction that would allow guests to continue building relationships while celebrating our marriage in an appropriately festive atmosphere. The dancing portion of the reception provided opportunities for more intimate conversations with individual guests who wanted to offer personal congratulations or discuss potential business relationships without the formal structure that had characterized the dinner activities. However, these conversations also revealed the extent to which Daniel monitored and attempted to influence my professional interactions, even during what should have been a celebration focused primarily on personal rather than business relationships. When Jennifer Chen from Henderson Group approached me during a break between dance sets to discuss potential follow-up projects that could build upon the successful completion of our initial contract, Daniel quickly joined our conversation and steered the discussion toward topics that emphasized the wedding celebration rather than future business opportunities. Jennifer, I'm so glad you could join us tonight, Daniel said, positioning himself between Jennifer and me in a way that made continuing our business conversation socially awkward. Victoria has told me wonderful things about working with Henderson Group. I hope you're enjoying this celebration. Patricia spent months planning every detail to make sure our guests would have a memorable evening. Daniel's intervention was subtle but effective in redirecting Jennifer's attention away from business discussions towards social conversation about the wedding reception. His approach was diplomatic enough to avoid appearing rude or controlling, but it successfully prevented the kind of professional dialogue that could have generated additional consulting opportunities for Sterling Marketing Solutions during a networking environment that should have supported such conversations. The pattern repeated throughout the evening as Daniel consistently positioned himself as a protective intermediary between me and the business contacts who attempted to engage in professional discussions during the reception activities. His behavior was framed as consideration for my ability to enjoy our wedding celebration without being distracted by work-related conversations, but it systematically limited my access to the networking opportunities that should have been natural benefits of hosting such a comprehensive gathering of influential business leaders. As the evening progressed and guests began consuming more alcohol while enjoying the festive atmosphere Patricia had created, the social dynamics became more relaxed, and conversations shifted toward topics that revealed more authentic perspectives about marriage, career priorities, and the cultural expectations that would influence how people interpreted my professional activities as Daniel's wife. The stage was being set for the confrontation that would expose the true nature of Daniel's expectations about marriage and control, though neither of us anticipated how dramatically a single moment would reveal the fundamental incompatibility between his vision of our relationship and my determination to maintain the professional identity I had spent years building through dedication, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to creating something meaningful through entrepreneurial achievement. The moment that would forever change the trajectory of my life began with what appeared to be an innocent business inquiry during the final hour of our wedding reception. The evening had progressed according to Patricia Morrison's carefully orchestrated timeline, with guests enjoying the elegant atmosphere while engaging in the kinds of meaningful conversations that would strengthen relationships and potentially generate future business opportunities for various attendees. The combination of excellent food, sophisticated entertainment, and strategic networking had created exactly the kind of memorable celebration that would reflect positively on the Morrison family's reputation for hosting exceptional social events. I was standing near the terrace doors, appreciating a brief moment of quiet reflection after hours of continuous social interaction, when my phone vibrated with an incoming call from a number I recognized immediately. The caller identification displayed the name of David Chen, founder and CEO of Pinnacle Technologies, a rapidly growing software development company that had been following Sterling Marketing Solutions' work with Henderson Group for several months. David had expressed interest in comprehensive marketing consulting services, but had delayed making a commitment while his company navigated a complex product launch that would determine their market position and funding prospects. The timing of David's call was both unexpected and potentially significant. Pinnacle Technologies represented exactly the kind of high-growth client that could establish Sterling Marketing Solutions as a preferred partner for technology companies seeking strategic marketing guidance during critical expansion periods. Their product had genuine market potential, but they required sophisticated marketing expertise to reach their target audience effectively and differentiate themselves from established competitors with larger marketing budgets and broader market recognition. I stepped onto the terrace to accept the call, seeking privacy for what could be an important business conversation, while remaining close enough to the reception activities to rejoin the celebration as soon as the discussion concluded. The desert evening provided a peaceful backdrop for focusing on professional matters without the background noise and social distractions that characterize the ongoing reception activities inside the ballroom. "Victoria, congratulations on your wedding," David began, his voice carrying both excitement and urgency that suggested significant developments had occurred since our previous conversation. "I know this is terrible timing, but something major has happened that could change everything for Pinnacle Technologies. We just received confirmation that we've been selected as finalists for a contract with Arizona State University that could triple our revenue within the next 18 months. The opportunity David described represented a transformative moment for his company, but it also created immediate challenges that would require expert marketing support to capitalize on effectively. The university contract would provide substantial revenue and credibility, but securing the final award would depend on Pinnacle Technologies' ability to demonstrate market traction and professional capabilities that distinguished them from other qualified competitors." "That's incredible news," I responded, genuinely excited about the possibilities such a contract could create for both David's company and potentially for Sterling Marketing Solutions if we could provide the strategic support they needed during this critical period. "What kind of timeline are you working with for the final selection process?" David's explanation revealed the complexity and urgency of the situation facing Pinnacle Technologies. The university would make their final selection within 6 weeks based on presentations that would demonstrate each finalist's technical capabilities, market understanding, and professional support systems. Companies that could show evidence of sophisticated marketing strategies and established business development processes would have significant advantages over competitors who relied solely on technical expertise without complementary business capabilities. "We need a comprehensive marketing strategy that demonstrates market research, competitive analysis, and strategic positioning that aligns with the university's educational mission while showcasing our technical advantages," David continued, his enthusiasm evident despite the challenging timeline they faced. Sterling Marketing Solutions' work with Henderson Group proved you understand how to develop compelling narratives for technology companies that need to communicate complex capabilities to non-technical decision makers. The project David was describing would require intensive research, strategic development, and creative execution within an extremely compressed timeframe. However, it also represented exactly the kind of high-visibility opportunity that could establish Sterling Marketing Solutions' reputation within Arizona's growing technology sector, while providing the financial returns that would support continued business expansion and staff development. As David outlined the specific requirements and potential compensation for the project, I found myself calculating the resources and time commitment that would be necessary to deliver exceptional results within their timeline constraints. The work would require complete focus and dedication during the initial research and strategy development phases, but successful completion could lead to long-term consulting relationships with other technology companies seeking similar strategic marketing guidance. The compensation for this project would be substantial, David explained, naming a figure that represented more revenue than Sterling Marketing Solutions had generated during any previous quarter. But more importantly, success with this university contract could position Pinnacle Technologies for additional growth opportunities that would require ongoing marketing consultation. We're talking about the potential for a multi-year strategic partnership that could benefit both of our companies significantly. The conversation with David continued for approximately 15 minutes as we discussed project requirements, timeline expectations, and the strategic approach that would be necessary to demonstrate Pinnacle Technologies' market potential and professional capabilities to university decision-makers. Throughout our discussion, I maintained awareness of the wedding reception continuing inside the ballroom, occasionally glancing through the terrace doors to ensure my absence wasn't creating social awkwardness or preventing me from fulfilling hosting responsibilities during our celebration. Daniel appeared in the terrace doorway just as I was concluding my conversation with David, and confirming that I would send him a detailed proposal outlining Sterling Marketing Solutions' approach to supporting Pinnacle Technologies' university contract pursuit. Daniel's expression revealed immediate displeasure at discovering me engaged in business discussions during our wedding reception, though he maintained the controlled demeanor that characterized his approach to addressing situations that conflicted with his preferences. David, thank you for thinking of Sterling Marketing Solutions for this opportunity, I concluded, aware that Daniel's presence required immediate attention to avoid creating tension during what should have been a celebratory evening. I'll send you a comprehensive proposal by Tuesday morning that outlines our strategic approach and project timeline. Congratulations again on making the finalist list for such an important contract. After ending the call with David, I turned to face Daniel with what I hoped would be an explanation that would address his obvious concerns about business conversations during our wedding celebration, while maintaining his support for the significant opportunity that Pinnacle Technologies represented for Sterling Marketing Solutions' continued growth and development. That was David Chen from Pinnacle Technologies. I began hoping to frame the conversation in terms that would emphasize the strategic importance of maintaining professional relationships, rather than suggesting that business activities were taking precedence over our wedding celebration. They've been selected as finalists for a major university contract, and they need comprehensive marketing support to secure the final award. It's exactly the kind of high-visibility project that could establish Sterling Marketing Solutions within Arizona's technology sector. Daniel's response revealed the extent of his displeasure with discovering me conducting business during our wedding reception. Rather than expressing interest in the opportunity or asking questions about the potential benefits for my professional development, he immediately focused on what he perceived as inappropriate prioritization of work obligations over personal celebrations and social responsibilities. "Victoria, we're at our wedding reception," Daniel said, his voice carrying an edge of controlled anger that I had rarely heard during our relationship. 300 people have come here to celebrate our marriage, and you're standing on the terrace conducting business negotiations instead of enjoying the evening we've spent 18 months planning. His criticism was delivered with enough volume and intensity to be audible to guests who were socializing near the terrace doors, creating the kind of public relationship conflict that would generate gossip and speculation about problems between the newlywed couple. I felt embarrassed by the attention his reaction was drawing from other attendees, while simultaneously feeling defensive about his characterization of a brief business conversation as neglect of our wedding celebration. It was a 15-minute phone call about a time-sensitive opportunity, I replied, attempting to keep my voice low and controlled to avoid escalating the conflict into a more public confrontation. I've been socializing and hosting guests for the past 4 hours. Taking one important business call doesn't mean I'm not committed to enjoying our celebration. Quote. Daniel's expression shifted from controlled displeasure to something that appeared more threatening, though he continued speaking in the measured tone that had characterized his approach to managing disagreements throughout our relationship. However, his words carried implications that revealed expectations about marriage and control that had been carefully concealed during our engagement period. "Give me your phone," Daniel said, extending his hand with an authoritative gesture that suggested compliance was expected rather than requested. "If you can't trust yourself to ignore business calls during our wedding reception, then I'll hold on to it until we can enjoy the rest of our celebration without work-related interruptions." The demand was unprecedented in our relationship and revealed a level of controlling behavior that Daniel had never displayed during our engagement period. Throughout our previous disagreements about work-life balance and professional priorities, he had consistently framed his preferences as suggestions and concerns rather than demands that required immediate compliance regardless of my own judgment about appropriate responses to business opportunities. "I'm not giving you my phone," I responded, instinctively stepping backward while maintaining eye contact to communicate that his demand was both unreasonable and unacceptable. I'm perfectly capable of managing business communications appropriately during social events. One brief call doesn't justify taking my personal property or treating me like someone who can't be trusted to make reasonable decisions. Daniel's reaction to my refusal revealed the true nature of his expectations about marriage, and the extent to which he viewed my independence as a threat to his vision of our relationship dynamics. The mask of supportive partnership that had characterized his public persona throughout our engagement dropped completely, exposing someone whose love came with conditions that required my complete submission to his preferences and judgment. "Victoria, you're embarrassing yourself and our families by conducting business during our wedding reception," Daniel said, his voice rising enough to ensure that nearby guests could hear his criticism of my behavior. "Everyone can see that you're more interested in work opportunities than celebrating our marriage. If you won't show proper respect for this occasion voluntarily, then I'll make sure you don't have any more distractions tonight." Before I could respond to his threat, Daniel reached toward me with obvious intent to take my phone by force, rather than accepting my refusal to surrender it voluntarily. The physical aggression was completely unexpected and represented a level of controlling behavior that transformed our relationship conflict into something far more serious and threatening. I pulled my phone closer to my body while stepping further away from Daniel, but my movement was constrained by the terrace railing that prevented me from creating adequate distance to avoid his reach. The physical dynamics of the situation made clear that Daniel was prepared to use force to assert control over my personal property and professional communications, regardless of my consent or comfort with such aggressive behavior. "Don't touch my phone," I said firmly, hoping that clear verbal boundaries would deter him from escalating the physical confrontation, while also communicating to nearby guests that his behavior was inappropriate and unwelcome. "This conversation is over. We can discuss this privately after our guests have gone home." Daniel's response was swift and violent. Rather than respecting my boundaries or acknowledging that his behavior was inappropriate for a public setting, he grabbed my phone from my hands with enough force to cause me to stumble backward against the terrace railing. The physical aggression was witnessed by several guests who had been socializing near the terrace doors and created exactly the kind of public scene that would generate lasting gossip about problems in our brand new marriage. "If you can't put our marriage first on our wedding day, then you don't deserve to have business contacts," Daniel said, his voice carrying a level of rage that revealed the depth of his need to control my professional activities and personal autonomy. "Maybe this will help you understand what's really important." Before I could process what was happening or attempt to retrieve my phone, Daniel raised it above his head and smashed it against the marble terrace floor with enough force to shatter the screen completely and scatter pieces of the device across the elegant stonework that Patricia had selected specifically for its aesthetic contribution to the reception venue. The sound of my phone being destroyed echoed across the terrace and into the ballroom, causing conversations to pause as guests turned to understand what had created such a dramatic disruption to the evening's celebration. The violence of Daniel's action and the public nature of the confrontation created immediate shock among the witnesses who struggled to process what they had observed from someone they knew as a successful businessman and respected community member. The shattered remains of my phone represented far more than damaged technology. The device contained 5 years of business contacts, client communications, project files, and professional relationships that constituted the foundation of Sterling Marketing Solutions' operations and growth potential. Daniel had not simply destroyed a piece of equipment. He had systematically attacked the professional identity I had spent years building through dedication, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to creating something meaningful through entrepreneurial achievement. The silence that followed the destruction of my phone lasted only moments before guests began murmuring among themselves about what they had witnessed, creating the kind of social attention that would ensure the incident became part of the permanent narrative about our wedding celebration. Daniel's violence had been observed by business associates, family members, and personal friends, whose opinions would influence our reputation within the community networks that were essential for both of our professional success. Looking at the destroyed remains of my phone scattered across the terrace floor, I felt a clarity that had been absent during months of subtle manipulation and gradually escalating control. This moment of violence had exposed the true nature of Daniel's expectations about marriage, and revealed that his love came with conditions that required the complete sacrifice of my professional identity and personal autonomy. The man I had married hours earlier was not the supportive partner I had believed him to be, but someone whose vision of marriage required my submission to his preferences regardless of the cost to my own goals, relationships, and sense of self-worth. The shattered phone represented the beginning of my understanding that I would need to choose between maintaining my marriage and preserving the identity I had worked years to build through professional achievement and entrepreneurial success. But in that moment of devastating clarity, I also felt the first stirring of something that would ultimately prove more powerful than Daniel's attempts to control and diminish me. I felt the determination that had enabled me to build Sterling Marketing Solutions from nothing into a thriving business. The resilience that had sustained me through years of financial uncertainty and professional challenges, and the unwavering commitment to creating something meaningful that no act of violence or manipulation could ultimately destroy. The shattered remains of my phone lay across the marble terrace like fragments of my former life, each piece reflecting the elegant lighting that Patricia Morrison had so carefully orchestrated for this celebration. The silence that followed Daniel's violent outburst stretched across the terrace and into the ballroom, creating a vacuum of shocked disbelief among the witnesses who struggled to reconcile the successful businessman they knew with the man who had just destroyed his wife's personal property in a fit of controlling rage. Standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by the debris of 5 years of professional relationships and business communications, I experienced a moment of absolute clarity that cut through months of subtle manipulation and gradually escalating control. The violence of Daniel's action had stripped away every pretense of loving concern and protective care, revealing the true nature of his expectations about marriage and the extent to which he viewed my independence as a threat that required elimination rather than accommodation. The guests who had witnessed the confrontation remained frozen in uncomfortable silence, uncertain how to respond to such an unprecedented display of domestic violence at what should have been a joyous celebration. Several people had pulled out their own phones to document the aftermath, though whether their intent was to preserve evidence or share gossip remained unclear. The social dynamics that had characterized the evening's networking and relationship building had been completely disrupted by Daniel's explosive revelation of his true character. Patricia Morrison appeared in the terrace doorway within moments of the phone's destruction, her face reflecting the kind of controlled panic that comes from recognizing that a carefully orchestrated event has been irrevocably damaged by circumstances beyond her management capabilities. Her eyes took in the shattered device, the uncomfortable crowd of witnesses, and her son's defensive posture as he stood over the evidence of his violent behavior. "What happened here?" Patricia asked, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she typically reserved for managing household staff or coordinating complex social events. Her question was directed primarily toward Daniel, though her gaze included me in a way that suggested she expected an explanation that would minimize the significance of what the guests had observed. Daniel's response revealed his immediate instinct to reframe the violence as justified reaction to my inappropriate behavior, rather than acknowledging the controlling and abusive nature of his actions. His ability to construct alternative narratives that portrayed his preferences as reasonable and my independence as problematic had been refined throughout our engagement period, but this situation required more sophisticated manipulation than their previous disagreements about work-life balance and professional priorities. Victoria was conducting business calls during our wedding reception instead of celebrating with our guests, Daniel explained, his tone suggesting wounded disappointment rather than explosive anger. When I asked her to put her phone away and focus on our special day, she became defensive and accusatory. The phone was damaged accidentally during our discussion. The fabrication was skillfully constructed to suggest that my phone's destruction had been an unfortunate consequence of relationship conflict rather than deliberate violence intended to eliminate my access to professional communications and business relationships. Daniel's version of events positioned him as a concerned husband, attempting to preserve the sanctity of our wedding celebration while portraying me as someone whose work obsession had created unnecessary drama during what should have been a romantic and meaningful occasion. However, several witnesses had observed the entire confrontation and understood that Daniel's explanation bore no resemblance to the aggressive behavior they had witnessed. The deliberate nature of his actions and the force required to completely destroy a modern smartphone made clear that this had been intentional violence rather than accidental damage during a heated discussion. Sarah Chen stepped forward from among the group of witnesses, her expression reflecting both concern for my well-being and professional assessment of the legal implications of what had occurred. As a corporate attorney specializing in business disputes and contract negotiations, Sarah understood both the personal and professional consequences that would result from Daniel's destruction of my business communications and client contact information. "Victoria, are you injured?" Sarah asked, positioning herself between Daniel and me while addressing the immediate safety concerns that took precedence over social etiquette or family harmony considerations. Her professional training had taught her to focus on victim welfare and evidence preservation, rather than allowing social pressure to minimize the significance of domestic violence incidents. The question forced me to assess my physical condition and emotional state in ways that had been impossible during the immediate shock of witnessing my professional relationships being destroyed through deliberate violence. My hands were shaking from adrenaline and emotional trauma, but I had not sustained physical injuries beyond the jarring impact of Daniel's aggressive grab for my phone. "I'm not physically hurt," I replied, my voice carrying more strength and clarity than I had expected given the magnitude of what had just occurred. But 5 years of business contacts and client communications were just destroyed deliberately by someone who claims to love and support my professional success. My response served multiple purposes beyond answering Sarah's immediate question about physical safety. It established for the witnesses that Daniel's violence had been directed specifically toward my professional identity and business relationships, demonstrating the calculated nature of his controlling behavior. It also communicated that I understood the significance of what had occurred, and would not accept his attempts to minimize or rationalize the destruction of my professional assets. Patricia Morrison's reaction to my characterization of Daniel's behavior revealed her immediate priority of damage control rather than accountability or genuine concern for my well-being. Her decades of experience managing the Morrison family's social reputation had prepared her for addressing various types of public relations challenges, but domestic violence at a family wedding presented unprecedented complexity that required careful navigation to preserve the family's standing within Phoenix's business and social communities. "I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding that can be resolved privately between family members," Patricia said, her tone carrying the kind of diplomatic authority she typically used to redirect uncomfortable conversations during social events. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion inside, where we can address any concerns without disrupting the celebration for our other guests." Patricia's suggestion represented an attempt to move the confrontation away from public observation, while creating opportunity for family pressure and social expectations to influence my response to Daniel's violence. Her approach reflected traditional assumptions about family loyalty and conflict resolution that prioritized maintaining appearances over addressing inappropriate behavior or protecting victims of domestic violence. However, the public nature of Daniel's violent outburst had created circumstances that could not be managed through private discussion or family mediation. The witnesses included business associates, professional colleagues, and community leaders, whose observations would influence both Daniel's reputation and my own standing within the networks that were essential for Sterling Marketing Solutions' continued growth and development. Several guests had begun quietly leaving the reception, uncomfortable with the tension and uncertain about appropriate responses to the domestic violence they had witnessed. Their departure was creating the kind of social disruption that would ensure the incident became part of the permanent narrative about our wedding celebration, regardless of any subsequent attempts to minimize or reframe what had occurred. Charles Morrison joined his wife on the terrace, his expression reflecting the kind of controlled anger that comes from recognizing that family reputation has been damaged by circumstances that could have been avoided through better judgment and self-control. His immediate focus appeared to be assessing the extent of social and business consequences that would result from his son's public display of violence and controlling behavior. "Daniel, explain to me what happened here," Charles said, his voice carrying the executive authority that had built the Morrison family's real estate empire through decades of strategic decision-making and relationship management. His tone suggested that inadequate explanation would result in consequences that extended beyond social embarrassment to include business and financial implications. Daniel's response to his father's demand revealed his recognition that the situation required more sophisticated damage control than simple denial or alternative narratives could provide. The presence of business associates and community leaders among the witnesses meant that his reputation within Phoenix's professional networks had been seriously compromised by the violence and controlling behavior he had displayed. "I was trying to help Victoria understand that our wedding reception wasn't appropriate timing for business negotiations," Daniel explained, his tone shifting toward the kind of strategic communication he typically used when addressing challenging real estate transactions or client relationship problems. She was prioritizing work calls over celebrating with family and friends who had traveled significant distances to support our marriage. The explanation maintained Daniel's pattern of framing his preferences as relationship necessities, while portraying my professional activities as threats to our marriage that justified aggressive intervention. However, his attempt to rationalize the phone's destruction as protective behavior rather than controlling violence was undermined by the witnesses who had observed the deliberate force and calculated nature of his actions. Jennifer Chen from Henderson Group approached our family group with the kind of professional composure that had characterized her approach to managing complex business relationships throughout her executive career. Her presence among the witnesses represented both personal support for my professional development and potential business consequences for Daniel's behavior towards someone whose consulting services had proven valuable to her company. "Victoria, I wanted to make sure you have my personal contact information in case you need any assistance," Jennifer said, offering me her business card while addressing the practical implications of losing access to 5 years of professional relationships and client communications. "Henderson Group values our partnership with Sterling Marketing Solutions, and we want to ensure that tonight's events don't disrupt our ongoing collaboration." Jennifer's intervention served multiple purposes that extended beyond immediate practical support. Her public acknowledgement of Sterling Marketing Solutions' value and her offer of continued partnership communicated to other witnesses that my professional reputation remained intact despite Daniel's attempts to undermine my business relationships through violence and controlling behavior. The offer also represented exactly the kind of professional support that would be essential for rebuilding the client communications and business contacts that had been destroyed along with my phone. Jennifer's recognition that Daniel's violence had been directed specifically toward my professional identity demonstrated her understanding of domestic abuse tactics that target victims' independence and economic security. Daniel's reaction to Jennifer's offer revealed his displeasure with external validation of my professional capabilities and business relationships. Throughout our engagement period, he had consistently discouraged outside recognition of Sterling Marketing Solutions' success, while framing his concerns as protective care rather than controlling behavior designed to isolate me from independent sources of validation and support. "Jennifer, I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter that will resolve privately," Daniel said, his tone carrying subtle but unmistakable hostility towards someone whose professional relationship with me represented exactly the kind of independence he had been systematically attempting to eliminate through months of manipulation and control. His attempt to dismiss Jennifer's support as inappropriate interference in family business revealed the extent to which he viewed my professional relationships as threats that required management rather than assets that deserve protection and cultivation. Daniel's perspective on marriage appeared to require complete isolation from external sources of validation, financial independence, and professional identity that might compete with his preferences for our relationship dynamics. My response to Daniel's attempt to control the conversation and dismiss external support represented the first moment since our wedding ceremony, when I actively resisted his manipulation, rather than attempting to find compromise solutions that would preserve relationship harmony while accommodating his controlling preferences. "Jennifer, thank you for your support and your commitment to continuing our professional relationship," I said, accepting her business card while making direct eye contact to communicate appreciation for her intervention during this difficult situation. Sterling Marketing Solutions values Henderson Group as a strategic partner, and I look forward to discussing future collaboration opportunities once I've addressed the immediate challenges created by tonight's events. My acceptance of Jennifer's support and my public acknowledgement of our continued professional relationship represented a clear statement that Daniel's violence would not achieve its intended purpose of isolating me from the business relationships that provided both financial independence and professional validation. The declaration was witnessed by the same guests who had observed his controlling behavior, creating accountability that would influence how the incident was interpreted within our professional and social networks. The moment marked the beginning of my conscious resistance to Daniel's attempts to control and diminish my professional identity. Standing on the terrace where my phone lay shattered, surrounded by witnesses who had seen the true nature of the man I had married, I felt the same determination that had enabled me to build Sterling Marketing Solutions from nothing into a thriving consulting practice. The violence that was intended to break my spirit and eliminate my independence had instead revealed the strength and resilience that would enable me to not only survive this betrayal, but transform it into the foundation for greater success and personal empowerment than I had ever imagined possible. The shattered phone represented the end of my old life and the beginning of a journey that would prove that no act of violence or manipulation could ultimately destroy someone determined to build something meaningful through their own skills, dedication, and unwavering commitment to creating value in the world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.